Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Dean's Lecture. I think I know everybody in the room. I'm Mike Clegg. I'm the Dean. And these are special lectures that we use to recognize the accomplishments of faculty who have been appointed or promoted to the level of professor in our school, which is a huge accomplishment. It's an accomplishment that's made, the decision is really made by our A&P committee, but it's based on the review of peers and experts from all over the world. So it's a huge achievement. It's a big achievement to get appointed to the faculty here, but to make professor is really something special. This is also the kickoff of BC Week, which is so we have Brian Caffo talking today, and we have Bill Clinton tomorrow. Okay, and luckily, yeah, you did get bumped, but luckily the Secret Service. The Secret Service has cleared the room, so it's safe. It's not going to be, there's no bugs in here and stuff. So I was thinking about how to introduce Brian. It's always a little awkward because many of the people in the room know the presenters better than I do. And although I've known Brian, I think since almost day one when I became dean. But I thought, in the spirit of teaching, and this is Brian could talk eloquently about research, about biostatistical methodology. Today he's going to talk about teaching. I thought I would make it an interactive introduction. Okay. So what was Brian Caffo's major when he first went to college?
Art, studio art.
What? Art. Yeah. So you said that, Ken? Who said that? Oh, yeah. But that's not fair. I mean, we got a ringer. Yes. So it was art, and it was at the University of Florida, and he said that he didn't do well in art, so he had to switch. He had to switch to statistics, mathematics and statistics, and that was at the University of Florida. So I always get this mixed up. Gators? Are they Gators?
Yeah.
Gators. Okay. Like Seminoles, hurricanes and stuff. But so you're a Gator. Okay. So and then his doctoral work was in. So John, you want to give this one too?
Oh, no, I'm done with it.
Okay. Statistical computing algorithms. And he's originally from Colorado Springs and then moved to Jacksonville, Florida. And I think see yourself as a Floridian, right? And I didn't realize that he's also a geneticist and has been doing genetic research at home, and told me he has two daughters with very curly hair. So he's demonstrated it's a dominant trait. Okay, and we're going to hear about his work in teaching statistics today and the MOOCs. But primarily what he does now is biostatistical methods in neuroimaging and neuroscience. And I remember when I first became dean, you presented. You were an assistant professor. You remember that you presented at the faculty meeting and talked about your work with Craig Hendricks and pharmacokinetics and antiretrovirals and it was, and I'm not going to say any more. Okay, but he did, and it was a talk that held my attention. But what was amazing. What was amazing to me, you had to be there, but what was amazing to me was that you were looking at compartmentalized, secretions. Remember that, and you had a number of participants, and then looking at the drug concentrations in those, and you were using, I think, you were doing like a two-stage Remel. And you were using exactly the same methods that we were using in our cohort study of 1,300 people to look at a whole entirely different range of exposures and outcomes. So it was a really education for me, that first lecture, in terms of the seeing how people could apply these techniques to such different things. So. Brian's a great teacher. He's advised 14 PhD students, and his first student, Lena Choi, has been promoted to associate professor at Vanderbilt. So that's a great way to start your professor year. And he was named an NIH Presidential Early Career Scientist in Engineers. He's a fellow of the ASA. He's received the Golden Apple, and I think just last week was named a Delta Omega as a faculty member. I think everybody knows well, maybe not. You're married to Carrie Tom, who's a physician researcher at the University of Maryland, and they met at a data conference, Lollapalooza, when you were at the University of Florida. So I think I got all the big points down, but we're all excited to hear. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge Brian and everybody in biostatistics for being a leader in this MOOC revolution. And when I looked at my schedule last night for today and saw what he was doing, I thought, well, I write this open mic column for the magazine, and it's due today, and it's on MOOCs. And I thought, well, maybe I should run this by I thought, well, I should have waited a day and wrote it after his talk, so we'll see how well it comes out in terms of agreement we can do at Kappa. But so please join me in congratulating Brian Caffo and welcoming him to the podium.
All right, thank you for that very kind introduction. And at any rate, so I'm Brian, and I'm going to be talking about teaching statistics for the future. And I'm going to be talking about the MOOC revolution and beyond. So let's see. I'm going to give an outline of the talk. So I'm going to talk about,
Master teacher, remember I said you were a master teacher?
The pointer is aliased with turning the machine is confounding. Anyway, I'll point the old-fashioned way. So what I'll talk about is what I supposedly do during the day, and it's not messing around with the internet. I'm going to give a brief taxonomy and history of educational models. I'm going to pretend like I'm an expert in that, just because to get a little bit of background for talking about the Coursera stuff, and then I'm going to talk about our involvement in Coursera, and what we intend to do with Coursera and some of the novel directions we're going to go with it. And then our specifically with respect to our data science series. And then I'm going to finish with something that I'm super excited about, which I have almost a very cursory role in. And it's this thing called Swirl, which you'll have to stay till the end to learn about what Swirl is. So in this data science series, we talk about a lot of new technology and about being a data scientist. So I'm trying to refresh my skills and practice what I preach. So these slides and everything are done exactly using all these tools that we teach in this data science series. So the slides are actually HTML5 slides. They're created using a program called Slidify. You can get the slides at GitHub. So and I even put a little fork me on GitHub if you'd like.
Point on the top.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Fork me on GitHub if you'd like up there. You can go there, and you can find it. You can find it from where on the internet you find all good things. bcaffo.com. You can go to bcaffo.com and then go to seminars, and then you can download these and try it. And I'll talk more about the slides in a bit because they're related. And the slides are co-written by Jeff, Roger, Nick, and Sean, who I'll describe in a minute. I wanted to thank the dean, especially.
The students probably don't even know who that is.
That's right. Well, okay. So I wanted to thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule of cracking down on Delta Tau Chi to attend this talk. So you can Google that if you've aged out of it, and I'll try to do a minimum. You can see, like down here, I got way too many slides. I got 55 slides, so I'll try and keep this stuff to a minimum. But I just want to say, you've made it when there's a joke Twitter account talking about your unprofessionalism. So this is not me. Tenured Brian Caffo is not me. I just want this disclaimer that at Tenured is a joke Twitter account made. It does follow me. I don't follow Tenured Brian Caffo, but but Tenured Brian Caffo does follow me. So if I slip during the day or do something silly, there's a good chance it'll come up on Tenured Brian Caffo. So anyway, I wanted to thank the collection of people that are involved in this, obviously me, Jeff and Roger, and Nick Carcetti, who's a student in the department, Sean Cross, who works a lot with the program, and Ira, who has really been one of the most key people in working on this. So I have several sets of acknowledgments. But I wanted to put the people who are involved in the MOOC stuff first because there's quite a few of them. So the Department of Biostatistics has offered a lot of support for this. The Center for Teaching and Learning, I put it twice because it's offered so much support. The School of Public Health as well, Johns Hopkins, of course. Coursera is helping us out a lot. And then, of course, Steve Ganji, Mike, Karen, Sukhan are all actively involved in helping us do these things. Everyone at Multimedia has been helping us quite a bit, and then Team Swirl, and that includes several at-large contributors. And then I have these interns, Lauren and Ethan, Any rate, we have lots of GitHub pull requests that have helped us improve our material. Certainly a lot of tolerant families, and I'll thank all of them, especially at the end. And then 8,000 intrepid self-learners who have agreed to be a part of this experiment with us. Okay. So anyway, what I supposedly do during the day. So my day job, I think probably if I were to pick the thing I've done while I'm here that I'm most proud of, it's creating this working group called SMART. It stands for Statistical Methods and Applications for Research and Technology. That's a backronym. And if you want, you can go to www.smart-stats.org, and that's our website. At any rate, it was co-founded with me and Ciprian, who's in the Department of Biostatistics, and since Martin Lindquist has joined the leadership of it, and then now we have some junior faculty, Vadim and Ani, who help run it, and that's just the local people. It's grown to the point where we have some external people that help us with it as well, and it's really a great group. And what I focus on specifically, so SMART actually researches all sorts of things. So Vadim and Ciprian are doing great work in accelerometry, and Ani and Martin and Ciprian are doing all these things in structural imaging, and I'm becoming increasingly focused on one particular sub area of technology and research and public health. And what I tend to like is to work in is the so-called resting state fMRI. And so, and in particular, I like to work in resting state fMRI as it relates to developmental disabilities. And this is the work of Jumin Yang. I picked it because it's nice pictures. And I'll tell you why it's nice in a second. So what we're interested in Jumin's work is sort of how the left and the right hemispheres of the brain communicate. So we have created a model, or she created a model, where we can actually estimate sort of how much left-right communication occurs in certain kinds of brain networks, assuming some amount of bilateral symmetry through the mid-sagittal plane. And so these look nice and symmetric. That's why they look pleasant, is because they're nice and symmetric, because we've mathematically forced them to be symmetric. And at any rate, that's the kind of stuff I do during the day. We think that these sorts of symmetric left-right hemispheric communication is associated with things like motor disabilities and things like that that often co-occur with developmental disabilities. So that's what I like to think about. But now I'm going to spend most of my time talking about other things that I like to think about, which is online teaching, which we have spent the better part of 2 years really investing in. So, but I want to set the stage, I want to talk a little bit about different kinds of educational systems and the way in which they're set up. So, of course, we're all most familiar with in-person teaching, and of course you can have online teaching and then some sort of blending between the two. I think everyone's probably familiar with that. I think something that gets talked about a little bit less is how active or participatory or interactive the learning is. How scalable or non-scalable it is. In-person teaching is sort of scalable. You can have large lecture classes in rooms like this. How much it costs to deliver it, so low cost, high cost versus things like freemium. And these things are all kind of obvious. One thing that comes up a lot, I think, in the ed tech community is the pacing of the class. So the difference between whether or not the class is student-paced or whether or not the class is teacher-paced. And so if you think about the vast majority of our education occurs in the form of when you're starting when you're very little, they kind of put people in little bins and move them along. And if you fall behind that bin, you're really in a problem, right? Like it just moves along without you, okay? And it's really teacher or course room instructor paced. And so I think this is a major distinction, I think, that will define new educational paradigms. Open access versus restricted access. So, and then when we talk about in-person classes, we could flip them, we could have them lecture style, we'd have some blending between flipped and lecture style. Another one that doesn't get discussed as often as I'd hope is whether or not the content itself is open or closed. So you can have the instruction be restricted access, but you could have the content be open access. And so we'll talk a little bit about how in our program we've addressed this particular characteristic. How much instructor interaction you get, what kind of credentialing you get, and then how the whole work is funded. These are, to me, I think these are some of the main criteria if you're talking about an educational system that you would have to think about. Now I've lost track of which one I'm supposed to do. This is like really like me. I've got like gadgets everywhere. I've got I've got 2 computers. I'm issuing Git pull requests at the moment that the talk is going on. And so it's exactly how I like to do things. Okay, so let me just go through some examples just to orient us. So if you just take everything, the thing that we're all most familiar with, which is traditional in-person teaching, what is its characteristics? It's usually lecture style. It's not necessarily scalable. You can have auditoriums and things like that, but you're capped out at a couple hundred people for the most part. Maybe some big state classes can get up into the thousands, but not too much. It's high cost, usually because it involves a lot of instructor interaction and TA interaction and brick and mortar and things like that. You get a large amount of instructor interaction, and you get and it's usually restricted access, but both in the terms of cost, but also there's a highly valued admissions process that vets students, and that's a big part of what a university credential gives you, is the vetting process. As a person who directs an admissions committee, that vetting process is extremely valuable. And so you get, extremely valued credentialing. And I would say most of the so-called, I put in quotes here, traditional online classes just try to mirror as much as they can the traditional in-person classes, accommodating people who can't attend the classes in person. So they tend to maybe be blended, or they try to approximate the traditional in-person classes, give people as much as this super high-quality in-person class as they can get, but doing it online. That's the traditional, and because you're delivering such a specific kind of product there, usually they have to be delivered at a pretty high cost. If you haven't seen what I like to call OILs, you're really missing out. So OILs like Code Academy and Code School, this is, I don't know how common this acronym is, but this is what I like to call them, so I'm hoping to make it happen. So online interactive learning are these things where you have student-paced interactive learning. So if you want to learn Python or something like that, you can go to Code School or Code Academy. I'm sure both of them have a Python module. And you learn Python by doing Python. It's completely student-paced. It's 100% interactive. And it's just a completely different way to think about delivering education. And these online interactive learning things are simply instances of intelligent tutoring systems. And so Swirl, that I'll talk about at the end, is another intelligent tutoring system that was developed in the Department of Biostatistics. They're just like what I'm calling OILs, which no one else calls OILs, but I'm going to call OILs. But they're just not necessarily online. So if you haven't seen Khan Academy, it's a great example of something that blends a lot of these things in a unique way. It's interactive, it's scalable, it's low cost. So Khan Academy, of course, started out as a bunch of YouTube videos, but now it's a very different entity now. And I think Khan is really the really spiritual leader of this whole movement. And then iTunes and OpenCourseWare, Udemy, these are all other modalities. But what we're going to talk about is MOOCs. So MOOCs stand for Massive Open Online Classes. And the problem with MOOCs is even defining what a MOOC is. And I love this picture from Matthew Plord that says, MOOCs, every letter is negotiable. Like, how do you define massive? Is 1,000 a massive? Well, I mean, you can have 1,000-sized in-person classes. That's not really massive. Is it open registration? Is it open content, free of charge, affordable, et cetera? You can have MOOCs that have local cohorts, right? Is it still a MOOC then? That experiment has been tried. Is it self-paced? Like, what defines a course? If it's self-paced, is it still a course? Is it the start and the end point? So anyway, it's not clear exactly what a MOOC is, but I think a MOOC is an online class whose primary characteristics are open access, low or no cost, or some sort of freemium model. They have to be highly scalable, even if there aren't a lot of students actually enrolled in the class and they're online. I think if it satisfies all those things, it's enough of a MOOC to declare it a MOOC. Oh, wrong one. Okay, so the most visible MOOC platforms are edX is a collaboration between MIT and Harvard Um, and it's a private nonprofit that is now its own separate company, and they have now partnered with Tsinghua, the famous Chinese university. They've partnered with the UT system, Berkeley, and a couple other universities. Udacity was a company that came out of the Stanford Computer Science Department. Sebastian Thrun and Peter Norvig, I think, were the name of the starters of Udacity. They broke off their highly popular machine learning class that they taught as a MOOC at Stanford into a company that is a private for-profit. Udemy is another private for-profit. Let me talk about Udemy in a minute. Coursera is the big dog. So I took this screenshot a while ago. This 5 million Courserians is low now. I think it might be up to 7 million at this point. So Coursera, I don't know if this statement is still true, but they used to brag that they were growing faster than Facebook was at its equivalent time, at that equivalent time frame. I don't know if that's still the case. Facebook continued to grow pretty fast. So they have, this says 447 courses, but I checked today, it was over 600 courses, over 90 partners. How Coursera works is they only partner with sort of Research One universities, and so but beyond that they're okay. And so there's a huge number of universities associated with Coursera, and the only way you can teach a class at Coursera is if your university develops an agreement with Coursera and both parties agree to it, and then the university is allowed to instruct on Coursera. Contrast that, for example, with Udemy. If you wanted to teach a course on Udemy today, you could go do it. Udemy is the idea of the freelance professor. You go add a class to Udemy, and they just provide the content hosting for you. And Udemy is surprising from all of the three of these in that I think it might be the only one that's actually making money. I'm not 100% sure about it, and certainly some of the instructors are making money. So anyway, Udemy I think is a quite different model than the rest of these. I think edX and Coursera have a lot in common in that they're really tightly partnered, and their success is highly hinged on the value of great places like Johns Hopkins or great places like Harvard and MIT. Their value is entirely taken from that. Udacity does all of its instruction in-house. So it hires instructors. Those instructors give lectures. And so some of all their instructors now are professional teachers, but in some cases they're hiring away faculty, but in a lot of cases they're not. So in addition to these things, I don't want to shortchange some of these other sites. So as an example, Stanford has its own. Stanford is a real hub for MOOC platform creation. So Coursera was out of the Stanford CS department, Daphne Kohler and Andrew Ng. Udacity was out of the Stanford computer science department. And then Stanford, which I presume its computer science department had some input on this, has its own MOOC platform that's specific to the university, unrelated to Coursera and unrelated to MIT. And several other universities have something similar. MIT has MITx, Harvard has HarvardX, and so on. Google, for a while, was hosting MOOC classes, and they created something called Google Course Builder, which is a MOOC platform delivery which was a MOOC platform delivery builder, and that since has been integrated into edX, which has now been open sourced. And then I would say, after all of these different MOOC platforms and places that are delivering MOOCs, there's a massive amount of development that's going into sort of side projects and portals and other things associated with these things. So I would say it's fair to say that Jeff and Roger and I probably get one email a day of someone saying, "Hi, I'm trying to build the Netflix of university classes, and we noticed that you're teaching Coursera classes, and we'd like you to host your content on our thing, or we'd like you to do whatever it is that we do on Coursera." And so I think there's an enormous amount of Silicon Valley type tech development. So how does Coursera work? If you've never taken a Coursera class, I wanted to show everyone what a Coursera class looks like. So when you log into the class, there's a portal. You can click on a video, and it will display the MP4 for you. Now they have an Android app and an iPhone app as well, and it will play the video for you on site, or you can download the MP4s. I've taken a couple of Coursera classes and downloaded the MP4s. I think actually that's kind of nice. So here's an example of I'm hosting this on YouTube.
That defines probability. We have this problem though, that in the continuous case, if we're modeling it as continuous, right, a specific value of a random variable, that the weight of that function is going to be 0. So
let's see. And then how do I go back? Backspace. Oh, and here's one where I was in a pinch and I had to do to do a video off my cell phone.
Okay, so I'm going to try and do this on my phone because I'm not at my office, but I'm going to talk about some questions related to quiz 5. And the first question says that in a population in a sample of 9 men, so n equal 9.
So anyway, so the videos I'm displaying off YouTube now because it's hard to log into the Coursera site. We also do office hours, so good grief, I don't want to click on an office hour. You can click on an office hour. If you want to see a video of me like stumbling around in my office and pretending like I know how to answer the questions and getting rifled questions from the internets at large, you can click on that. So anyway, if you're interested in the equipment, I have that there. That I've been using lately. So how do we do evaluation? So we have quizzes, or I have quizzes. So the quizzes, that you have this way that you can enter in quizzes right here, and I chopped off the bottom so you can't see the answers. So if you want to take it, you're going to have to answer it legit. The website has MathJax loaded up, so you can type equations. So you can see like that beta there is as an example is not an image of a beta. It has MathJax loaded, so those of us who work in statistics or computer science, mathematics, these sort of disciplines, we use this program called LaTeX to do mathematical typesetting. So anyway, Coursera has been very kind to us and loaded up the JavaScript library that auto-renders equations. And for those of us that type a lot of LaTeX, it makes it very easy. So when we write out quiz questions and things like that, we can include as much math as we want. Roger actually does programming assignments. But since I haven't done that, I didn't include a slide of that. But you can have programming assignments where your Coursera will auto-check the programming output. And then let's suppose you want to have the students do a project. Well, the enrollments in these classes tends to be pretty big. And so how do you do a project when you have tens of thousands of students in a class? Well, the only solution is to have them grade each other. And so it has an automated peer grading system, so that the students can grade each other. And then it has the system so that it can, as a function of completing the assignment and getting credit for the assignment, you can assign points for whether or not they graded other students. And you can, anyway, Coursera's thought through the peer grading thing as well as this can possibly be thought of. The devil in trying to set up these peer grading assignments is you have to set up a grading rubric. And the grading rubric tells the other students how much points to give for each thing, and you have to be very you can't ask them did they do this right. That's not a that's a hard thing for a student in a class to answer. It's so if you're testing something about regression coefficients, you can't say did they interpret their regression coefficients correctly. That's a lot to ask. You can say, did they interpret their regression coefficient at all, right? And give a point yes or no for that. And you have to be highly specific. The students don't like peer grading, but it's about the only way that you can scale up projects. The forums. So the main way that the students interact with each other. And I see people straining to read this. I'll zoom in a second. The main way that people interact with each other is on these so-called forums. This is a Reddit style or Hacker News style forum where you vote up, where the students each vote up or down each other's questions and responses, and we can go in and vote up and down the students' comments, delete ones that are crazy. approve answers, so we don't have to answer all these form questions. Like we can click on a button and say, hey, this person answered this question pretty well, and so now I don't have to type anything, so I just click on approve. So that's awesome. The one thing I would mention, if you ever plan on doing this, is that the forums can be pretty brutal, because you're on the internet, and the only requirement that to take these classes is to have a valid email address, and people can probably get around that. So anyway, here's an example of you're on the internet. This is one complaining about the timbre of Jeff's voice. No disrespect intended, but I find the timbre of his voice somewhat unpleasant. I find the videos difficult to listen for an extended period of time. I actually get a headache. I'm searching. This person's searching in the forums for medical advice about the timbre of Jeff's voice. So, and I can just say that I was just checking my forums this morning, and oh man. So you got to be a little thick-skinned. You're on the internet. The other thing I would mention about these classes is it's not the idea of these classes is it's not just the Coursera site and our input into the Coursera site. You get all these users, and it creates this kind of online experience, right? So people, when the course starts, there's all these Twitter, hashtag our programming for Roger's class that comes up where there's this massive Twitter presence and Reddit discussion groups break out and actual in-person discussion groups break out. So you'll see one of the first forums always on any Coursera site, on any Coursera course is, hey, I'm in wherever, and I'd like to form a study group. And you'd see responses, and people meet somewhere, and they watch the videos together, and they talk about things, and they work on the homeworks together. So the forums are part of the Coursera experience where students interact with each other, but the broader experience has to do with when a course kind of comes out that all of the internets and social media is brought to bear on it, and some in-person things too. Okay. So I want to talk about the biostat involvement. So the biostat involvement was concurrent with a School of Public Health initiative in Coursera, and the School of Public Health was really on the vanguard of this for the whole university. The three biostat courses I taught this course called Mathematical Biostatistics Bootcamp that ran in September 2012. Roger's Computing for Data Analysis class ran in September 2012, and Jeff Leake's Data Analysis class ran in January 2013. Here's the numbers. So we've had a lot of classes since then, and really I'll show later on how Johns Hopkins is just killing it in MOOCs. We're destroying everyone else. I don't know in a good way or a bad way, but in a way.
Destroying has a bad connotation.
Yeah. Okay. So we're really out in front, is what I would say. Here's my. So now I've had 5 offerings of Bootcamp 1, and I just keep doing it. And I always hover around 20K. And then I liked it so much, I bought the sequel, and I got Bootcamp 2, which is a more modest class of size 10,000 usually. Roger's Computing for Data Analysis has been run 4 times. Its largest enrollment was over 80,000, but it's highly consistent. Jeff Leake's Data Analysis class is our most popular class by far, with 101,000 enrolled students in one offering, 90,000 in another offering. Scott Zieger's Case-Based Introduction to Biostatistics had 20,000. John McGrady's Statistical Reasoning class had 25,000 about. Martin Lindquist's fMRI class had about 25,000. You see some common themes, by the way. I mean, there is, of course, instructor-to-instructor variation and things like that, but we also see some common things in what makes a blockbuster class on Coursera. So Jeff Leake, in addition to being an extremely talented instructor and being highly engaging and being this just overall awesome guy, right? We also see is that if you label something kind of generically and teach it to, pitch it at the broadest audience possible, you're going to get a lot more enrollment. If you do something like Bootcamp, Mathematical Biostatistics Bootcamp, this has several hits against it. It has math in the name, it has biostatistics in the name instead of statistics, right? People might say, oh, well, I'm interested in statistics, not biostatistics. Boot camp, people don't even know what that means, and it's not even really accurate in this class because it's our longest Coursera course by far, and I thought, oh, well, I need a second semester because I didn't cover enough. So if you take these two together, it's like it would be like the world's worst boot camp because it would go on and on and on and on. But computing for, and we see that like Roger's class, skill-based class. So Roger's class does mostly R programming, and of course Roger is a wonderful instructor too, and he's I think probably of all of us the most technically proficient at deploying Coursera classes. Is highly consistent in being able to draw 50,000 or more students. Another interesting fact is these highly technical classes. So this class requires calculus. Tends to be very consistent on the enrollment numbers. It just tends to churn right along at just under 20,000. Oh, and here, and then we can stack them up. You can see this, and you can see the overall enrollments for each class. So you can see the bars are about the same for my class. So I've got about a total of 100,000 in this one. Bootcamp 2, I'm only hitting about 20,000 after 2 offerings. But you can see Rogers actually eclipsed Jeff in terms of total enrollment. So Rogers had 244,000. And you see, like, I think fMRI, statistical reasoning, and a case-based introduction, these, if run in perpetuity, I think would steadily draw 20,000 because they're rather technical and they really nail a specific audience, right? So I think it's highly constant that you would get 20,000 enrollees for fMRI. But if you wanted to boost the numbers for fMRI, I think you'd have to change the name a little a little bit. But again, the enrollment numbers are just one thing. How many people are actually taking these classes legitimately? So here's the statement of accomplishments by offering, and I'll just stack these up because so we don't talk about all of them. So if you look, my number of statements of accomplishments only at 44,000. Computing for data analysis is 21,000, and so on. And the proportions are about the same. So the statement of accomplishment are the people that actually complete the class, and at a satisfactory level. Oh, this is neat. Okay, so let's see. I want enrollment, and I want unique colors, and I want enrollment to be the size of the dot, and I want to track computing for data analysis in Bootcamp 1. Maybe Bootcamp 2, and I'll play it. And I want time on this axis. There we go. Here, this will just show you the trend over time. So anyway, we're going to teach people how to make these kinds of plots automatically in our data science specialization, which I'll get to in a minute. So anyway, what you can see is Bootcamp 1 has this incredibly consistent over time enrollment numbers, and Bootcamp 2, by all appearances, seems to have the same. Roger's class might have done some harvesting, right? Like it tends to. I'm wondering if he kept offering it in even numbered times. If it was like there was a lot of interest and then a little bit of harvesting, and then a lot of interest and a little bit of harvesting. I'm curious if this harvesting effect is real. And it jumped up. I think this jump up was just because it was a very good class and word got out. And I think that jump up was my guess is that jump up is not noise because it's a substantial jump up, right? He went from a upper middle sized class to a monster Coursera class between 2 offerings of the same class. And so I'm wondering if that was just that word had kind of gotten out and that both these cases were a little bit of harvesting. But you take these technical classes and there tends to not be too much harvesting. Okay, and that plot didn't show up, but it wasn't that good anyway. Okay, so just cumulative enrollment, we're at about 800,000. These jumps are from, I think, that jumps from Jeff's class, I'm pretty confident. And this must have been one of Roger's class. So let me talk about completion rate. So if you see that, Brian, only has 4,000 statements of accomplishment despite having almost 100,000 students enrolled in the class. Let me just go through some numbers. So first of all, let me just point out that students participate in MOOCs for a variety of reasons. And I've done this. It's very easy to do this. Numerous students sign up for a course, but they don't actively participate. It takes no effort to click on a course and say, I'm interested in that. And it's like a slight declaration of interest. But to actually go into the class and do something, well, then that takes away from my TV time, and I don't want that, right? So take, for example, a recent offering of Bootcamp 1. I had 17,000 students. only 10,000 of them ever accessed the course site ever. So 7,000 of them just clicked on, well, yeah, this seems kind of interesting, but then on retrospect wasn't more interesting than, like, I don't know, whatever else. That 10K, those 10K that accessed the course site, 3,000 of them said, maybe not, and decided not to watch any videos whatsoever. And so the other 7,000 watched a video. And of those 5,000 said, maybe I don't like Brian, maybe this is too hard, it's too incoherent, whatever. But 5,000 of them dropped out at that point. And then of those 2K, only 196 earned a statement of accomplishment. Of those 196 that earned a statement of accomplishment, 129 were willing to put money down on it. Now I don't know what the overlap of these. 129 were willing to put money down, and only 128 posted to the forums. So I'm wondering what the overlap between those two is, coincidentally close. But the number, one thing to point out is if you look at the signature track statement of accomplishments, the signature track statement of accomplishments, it's very high. It's a very high percentage. So if you ask people to just put a little bit of money down, then they will complete the whole class. And these classes, I would put them. They're very rigorous. They're very good classes. They're rigorous, but I wouldn't put them as rigorous as an in-person class. So I think So I think that if many of these Coursera students were electing to put the effort in, they would likely pass. Let's see. So here's some summary statistics. So this considers my 2 boot camp classes: computing for data analysis, case-based introduction to statistics, Scott Zeger's class, John McGrady's statistical reasoning class, Martin Lindquist's fMRI class, Jeff Leake's data science toolkit class, R programming and getting and cleaning data. We've had 780,000 students enrolled, 19 course offerings. We average about 41,000 per class. The minimum class size is for me, and that's 7,000 for a boot camp too, but they were all really good. And the class was excellent, I heard. The maximum class size was 102,000 for data analysis offering 1. That class, by the way, got listed as one of the top 10 largest Coursera classes ever. And it's competing against classes that, it's a data analysis class, and it's competing against classes like an introduction to rational thought or something like that. Classes that lots of people would like because you might buy a book like that at the bookstore, right? But data analysis, right? This is a highly specific skill. It just goes to show you something about how much people want data analysis skills. So I just want to comment. I've been saying the word signature track in case you were wondering what that is. This is Coursera's more formal form of verification. And so what it's based on is typing patterns. They type in something, and typing patterns are highly unique according to Coursera. But in case there's a false negative and they say you're not you can have secondary, or you're not near a keyboard. If you're doing it on your cell phone or something, you can have secondary verification via web apps. They do give student aid, just in the interest of time, I'll skip over the rest of that. Some interesting fallout from this. So Jeff's was one of the top 10 most enrolled Coursera's classes. Rogers has eclipsed it in cumulative enrollment. We've had 4 of us ran signature track, and then I'll talk about the data science series in a minute. My class was featured in the Washington Post. Roger got interviewed on Anderson Cooper, and with Mike on, was it NPR or PBS?
NPT.
And, okay, so it was on NPT. And so Roger was like hanging out with Anderson Cooper. Well, or actually a sub Anderson Cooper. But nonetheless, he was on CNN. And then Scott introduced case-based, and these other classes that we've already talked about have been introduced. So, Johns Hopkins is really leading, and it's really the School of Public Health. So there's several other School of Public Health classes that I haven't mentioned, for example, and some very brave ones. There was, Karen taught a class on vaccines here, which is, I think, if you were to do something on the internet, that is the most challenging thing. Teach a massive open online course on vaccines. So, most of this is School of Public Health. And a handful of others throughout the university. But we're at 32 classes being listed on Coursera. The next closest is Penn with 31. Duke had 20 on Coursera, and Stanford has 18 on Coursera. Now, Stanford has its own MOOC platform as well. And to the extent that you want to count Udacity as Stanford, you'd have to add those to them. But what's interesting is JHU Biostat is 16, right? So it's 16 classes from JHU Biostat. This is unique classes, not class offerings. I think if you were to do class offerings, we'd move far up. And so you have to, we're tied with University of Washington and Georgia Tech for we're competing with entire universities. MIT had 26. So it's a little unfair if you talk about MIT, Harvard, and Stanford because they have concurrent MOOC platforms that exist outside of the edX. This is only edX, Coursera, or edX and Coursera by itself. But anyway, it's just to go to show that we've sort of really fully jumped into this, and we're putting a massive amount of content into it. So we're doubling down on it to some extent. Of course, I don't know how to advance the slides. There we go. I just want to do a couple of case studies. Here's one where a person said, I read a description you're teaching on mathematical biostatistics boot camp. I have a son in prison in Georgia, and I would like him to take this class because he has a mathematical background. The problem is he's not allowed to use the internet, and this mother was asking and this is indicative of the kind of people that take these classes. They're so earnest about, they care. It would be very easy to cheat in these classes. It would be ridiculously easy to cheat in these classes. And the students really care, and they really honestly care about learning and getting things right on their own terms. But anyway, this mother was asking if she could print out the quizzes and take them to him, have him fill them out, and then she could bring them back. So I thought that was a really, really nice email I received. Of course, I said yes. Here's another interesting development is that there's been articles. This was on I'm forgetting the name of this magazine, where a person tweeted that I got my job because I took Jeff Lee's class, and he retweeted their Simply Stats blog. So and then this person's tweet then he then got interviewed by this magazine. Which was, I think, Fast Company was the name of the magazine, which is a well-read magazine in the kind of technology sector. And anyway, it covered all these people that have been getting jobs because they took these Coursera classes. And Roger has this story where a person interviewed at Google or wanted to get an internship at Google after having taken his class. His interviewer said, "Oh yeah, I took Roger's class," and he got that internship. And then when he went to go apply to get a job at Google, the same thing happened again. So there is some anecdotal evidence, at least, that that the credential has value. So we wanted to push this further, and so the paradigm we were kind of working under was trying to come up with an arena to do something that was like a semi-master's degree. And fortunately, Coursera was of the same mindset at the same time. They wanted to do some sort of semi-master, somewhere in between just continuing ed and a master's degree. And we looked at some of these things like the McKinsey report that's been highly cited, where their study in 2011 projected 140,000 to 190,000 unfilled positions in data analytics experts in the US, and a shortage of 1.5 million managers and analysts who have the ability to understand and make decisions using data. Or they said using big data, but whatever, using data, right, big or small. And this comes at the same time of the complementary problems of tuition costs outstripping static income levels. So we created this Johns Hopkins data science specialization on Coursera, and this launched at the same time Coursera launched their sort of idea of semi-degree programs. And what was nice about this specialization is we got to define what data science is, which is data science is kind of an industry buzzword. And so we get to define it, and because we're teaching so many people, it might be the case that our definition wins out. So here's our definition of what a data scientist would need to know. So the data scientist toolbox, so it's 9 classes. Each class takes exactly 4 weeks. All the classes run, we're ramping up right now, and all the classes run monthly in perpetuity, or until we flop over. So there's the data scientist toolbox. There's R programming is the second class, getting and cleaning data, exploratory data analysis, reproducible research, which is the process of creating reports is a way to think of it. For us in the research world, right, it's the idea of creating research papers that are perfectly reproducible. Maybe if you're in industry, it would be creating reproducible reports. Statistical inference, so I teach the crusty old statistics class in the lot, and everyone's complaining because I teach the weed out class. Regression models, practical machine learning, developing data products, and then if you pass all 9 of these classes and you pay the fee, all of them are offered completely for free, but you can do signature track for all of them for $49 each. If you pass all of them at signature track, then you can enroll in this so-called capstone project for another $49, and then if you pass the capstone project, then you get a specialization certificate that says you've done the whole thing. Okay, and you get that. You get something, it does have Johns Hopkins University branding on it. It's a specialization certificate, and that's what it looks like. You get a PDF. Let's see. So some unique aspects of the program. It's one. I think it's neat that it's a completely redesigned stat curriculum, and we got to just derive a new curriculum from the ground up. So it's 9 signature track classes, 9 classes that you can take signature track. There's 1 capstone project course. The total cost is $490. 9 classes plus the capstone project is 10 classes at $490 total. But it's modular. You can take them as you need to. Every class is exactly 4 weeks. Every class will be run. So we're ramping up to where all 9 classes are running, and then we're going to run 9, 9, 9, 9, 9 as much as we can. No, we're just going to, not as much as we can. We're just going to keep doing that. We'll hopefully get very good at it. So the students will be assessed by quizzes, in-video quizzes, programming assignments, and peer assessment assignments. It's going to be run monthly after the initial rollout, which is happening right now. So if you see us stressed out in the hallway, that's probably why. All the content, this is the neatest part about the whole thing. Every single letter of lecture is not only open sourced, it's completely version controlled on GitHub. So you can get from the very first letter we typed of this program to its current incarnation, the whole development you can download from GitHub. And that, so far, getting data, the Toolbox R programming and getting cleaning data have all run with enrollments of 64,000, 62,000, and 34,000 respectively. I'll skip over the platform choices. Just it's all R, Coursera, and so on. All the things I've been talking about. I want to talk about, we cover all the standard stat or most of the standard stat content that you would think would occur. But we also cover some interesting new things like likelihood and not new, but old things that are often not covered in an intro stat class, like likelihood and Bayesian analysis and machine learning, and a whole class, a whole month on exploratory data analysis. So, but it covers the greatest hits and then some of ordinary stat of regular stat programs. But we also cover reproducible research, report generation, how to give presentations, how to give reproducible presentations, how to do interactive graphics, data munging, obtaining data, we teach programming. We teach people how to make plots. We don't just teach exploratory data analysis, but plotting using ggplot2, R charts, R-based graphics, and we have a capstone project. And I would just give you an example of some interesting content. So Shiny is this web app, this way you can develop web apps quickly in R. And here's an example of a great web app. John Michelli took so we have this conference, and they don't have a website. So John Michelli wrote an R program that scraped their program and created a website for the Eastern North American Regional Biometrics Society that is now, like, as far as ENAR is concerned, its website. So that was pretty neat. And if you're wondering if this stuff can be used for public health, here's an example that we are working on. I was working on in order to learn Shiny. So Rawan was a master's student of mine. She worked with researchers at KKI to look at when kids were coming out of post-traumatic amnesia. And so we create this, she developed the prediction algorithm, which kills, by the way. It's really good. The prediction algorithm really just beats everything else by a landslide. So she took all the best prediction algorithms for this, and it was really actually not too hard to beat them. And she just really beat them really badly. And so we thought, oh, well, we should develop a web app. So we're in the process of developing it. But the idea is that, the time from her, her substantial amount of work her substantial amount of work to develop the algorithm took a lot of time, and it was a full master's thesis. But the time from that algorithm development to deploying a website was an afternoon for me. Okay, or not even an afternoon, a couple hours. So that's what Shiny is allowing us to do now. And I just want to say, just before I finish, that we have some interesting capstone industry partnerships that are percolating, where the capstone will actually be analyzing an industry partner's data, and we have SwiftKey on the line, hopefully, which will be our first industry partner. And if you have an Android phone and you're not using SwiftKey, you are simply not living life to the fullest. And just the cost comparison, it's nuts. The cost comparison, so the JHU data science is $490. The next closest one is Udacity's data science program at $2,500. Now it has about double the course hours, so let's double the cost of ours. We're still beating them. University of Washington's data science is $3,000, but then it gets a huge jump up for all these other ones: $35,000, $50,000. $53,000, $60,000. So we're beating some of these by 2 orders of magnitude. So at any rate, that's where we are, or at least where we will be by the end of the summer, having gone through this whole thing once. And I would just want to spend a minute talking about where this stuff I think is going. And I think where it's going is toward sort of truly interactive learning, truly student-paced learning. And I want to just briefly talk about a project from a student in the department, Nick Carcetti, who created Swirl. Swirl stands for Statistics with Interactive R Learning. And the idea of Swirl is you learn data analysis and R programming in R. So you're conducting data analysis while you're learning data analysis. There's no distinction between the software that you use for data analysis and how you're learning it. So you type Swirl, and it brings you back to an R prompt, and it asks you a bunch of questions, and it prompts you to do things like, here it's just teaching a little bit of R programming, and then it checks to see if you're right, and if you're wrong, it says, well, maybe not. And if you're right, it says, you're awesome. And you'll feel really good about yourself after doing Swirl, because Swirl is very positive. Let's see. So here we're using Swirl in our Coursera classes. Here's the regression class where it's asking you to fit a least squares line, and it has a little slider here where you move the slider and it tells you, well, here's how much you've minimized the least squares criteria with that particular line, and it's demonstrating how to do least squares, but then they're also going to have to fit a regression model at that time. So and there's educational theory, not educational, there's cognitive neuroscientific theory, right, that shows that this kind of learning is how we really encode learning, encode information. So, okay, and we're embedding it into Coursera. So Roger and Nick have run this once in the R programming class, where you at the Swirl command line in R, upload your assignment with a unique. You have to type in a password, but it uploads it so that when you go on the Coursera website, it says, here's how many Swirl modules you've gone through. So. And then you might wonder, well, I think Swirl is so awesome, I want to start authoring Swirl content, but so Nick created Swirlify, which is a Swirl content authoring program where you just enter in a couple of text fields and basically type Swirlify, and it creates the Swirl module for you. So Swirl is pretty neat. So check it out. It's at swirlstats.com, and Swirl has had. For 3 months of Swirl's existence, on one CRAN mirror, it had 4,000 downloads. So it just goes to show you the kind of demand for these kinds of tools.
Brian, 20,000
downloads, right? In 3 months?
Yeah.
So there you go. So any rate, so that's leaving Swirl now. That's what you do. But this, by the way, takes you back to an R prompt. So you're never outside of an R prompt. They figured out a way to catch your input in an R prompt, analyze it, check to make sure you're not doing something dastardly, and then check it back. So anyway, that's everything I wanted to say. I just wanted to reissue some thanks. I said I was going to have 2 sets of acknowledgments. I, of course, want to acknowledge Jeff and Roger, Nick, and Sean, and especially Ira, who I think doesn't get as much credit as he deserves for how much he's helping with us. And I should have added here everyone from the Center of Teaching and Learning, everyone from Multimedia, and the whole Bloomberg School of Public Health support staff for online teaching here. Of course, Johns Hopkins, the Bloomberg School of Public Health, and all the support we've received here, the Department of Biostatistics especially, and of course the SMART group with Chikram, Martin, Ani, and Vadim. And of course the students, our students are just the best, and I really, really enjoy working here. And one of the reasons why I like working here, probably the biggest reason why I like working here is because of the students, and I just, it's wonderful to see them do well and go out and do all the wonderful things that they do. And then of course I want to thank my peeps. So that's my wife Carrie, and that's Scarlett and PJ. And I think that's a version check. So my actual Twitter handle is @bcaffo. The fake Twitter handle is tenuredbcaffo.
Because @bcaffo didn't. I think somebody erased your Twitter account, and the only one left is So that's great. So let me ask. So why do you do this? I mean, you got a job, right? But why are you, and maybe others want to comment? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, we get that question a lot. Actually, yeah, we had an interesting interaction with the provost for Rice University, who said, "We'll check back with you guys in June and see how sane you are still." But you know, well, first of all, it's actually quite addictive, and I think it's very fun to be out in front on something. I think we are maybe a little bit out in front on this, and so it's very fun to be out in front. I think we believe in it, and we think it's very well coordinated with the university mission and the school public health mission and the department's mission.
Yeah, I think it builds too. You know, we've, through Jim Yeager's efforts and others, SUCOM, we've had this commitment to open courseware. You know, we have, I don't know, 20,000, unique visitors a month to that for 10 years. And so, but I'll just ask one more question. So it seems to me this issue about pricing that you showed, that's a data optimization issue, right?
Sure.
And
certainly.
so it'll be interesting, and you can get that data in 6 months from all the sites and then look and see what your price point should be.
And it is interesting. I do not. Well, first of all, I should comment on your other point. Is that it's true that the school of public health has been on the vanguard of open education for a very long time. So if you haven't, so the MOOC stuff got a lot of press recently, but prior to the MOOC stuff, the school of public health was involved. If you haven't checked out OpenCourseWare, the Department of Biostatistics, School of Public Health as a whole has been involved in OpenCourseWare, and then iTunes University. And and online, pretty early in online teaching as well.
Yeah. Well, I think we're the first MPH, right, Jim? We're the first online MPH. Right. 1995, we started putting courses up, and I think 99 was when the MPH went. So it's really impressive. I mean,
but to address your latter question, one thing that's interesting, I don't think the freemium model, no one knows whether so the freemium model is where you get a lot of users by delivering a product for free, and then a small subset of those users pay for a premium version of it. So that's how Spotify works, and Gmail works, and YouTube works, and just about well, YouTube's ads, but a lot the freemium model is a relatively new model, and I don't with regard to pricing, I don't know that it's been tremendously well worked out. What is the right sort of freemium model and the right pricing in academics?
So comments or questions? Yeah, Peter?
So other than the fellow in prison, who takes this course?
So we have
Other than the guy
so
in prison,
a high percentage of my class is prisoners.
2.2 million people in prison.
That's right. So it turns out it turns out that the access to Coursera actually parallels a lot things like access to the internet it tends to try. Most Courserians are college grads. They're middle class and up. So you would hope that Coursera, and Coursera does have reach, but the numbers are skewed in the same way that traditional education is skewed towards higher incomes, towards the more educated already, toward people with already that have more educated parents, that sort of thing. Yeah.
The second question is 100,000 times $500. Is that real? It's $50 million.
So
I don't have it.
The indirect costs would be wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is, so yeah, if you were to do the numbers, right? So at say was it $20,000 and $50 a pop, you'd get $1 million, and that $1 million, yeah, exists.
So when we
Coursera swipes the credit card. So at the time you do signature track, Coursera swipes a credit card. If you apply for financial aid, they'll give it back to you. I forget if they swipe your credit card or not. You know, it's done online, but whatever. The digital equivalent of swiping a credit card. But when there's a signature track enrollee, Coursera has collected the money. So.
Yeah. And so we have, you know, so Coursera, the way this happened, called me, I think, right? They because they knew about OpenCourseWare, and they had talked to a faculty member in computer sciences here who had come from Stanford, and she referred us. They had signed up 6 or 8 universities at that time that had schools of public health, but nobody was participating. So our university negotiated a university-wide agreement with Coursera about cost sharing. I think we get a few dollars. I think we've gotten a check for $167 or so, $600. So, but hopefully it will grow, and we'll figure out how to plow it in.
I was going to get a new set of speakers.
Yeah.
Brian, you hinted in your setup about this open versus closed content, and it's an ongoing debate you kind of alluded to, right?
Well, I guess.
What's being said, and what do you wish was being said? What would you pay us all to tweet when we leave the room?
Well, let me see. I'll show you. I'll just show you how all our. Oh, this is going to be more of a disaster than I'd hoped. Anyway, all of our stuff is on GitHub, which is the way that we've done it. I think it's not. It's for open access versus closed access. I don't think it's the issue of there being sides. I think there's people who open access their things, and then there's people who don't think about it. I think it's probably the more relevant. I think what we like is more than anything for people to be aware that is an option. And here at the university, or here at the Bloomberg School of Public Health, there's been a culture of open access. OpenCourseWare was our kind of big foray into open access educational materials. So and if you look, OpenCourseWare is pretty well populated. But yeah, so I don't think there is no kind of there's a movement of people who would like to see more open access materials, and we're members of that movement. But
well, can I just comment? Sure. I was struck when you first, I forget where I first heard about the data science, but we found about the courses that you're putting on, and like the R course that Roger teaches, there are courses that by and large you don't teach. As you said, it's a new curriculum, and in some ways it's a much more applied curriculum.
Yeah.
Did you do that because you thought that's what the open course, the MOOC needed, or it's because it's something you'd like to teach here? I mean, why? How did you?
Well,
you have a different philosophy in picking these courses.
Yeah. Well, so let me comment, and then is Roger still here? He left. Okay. Well, I would have.
Roger Peng has left the room.
That's right. So I think it. There is if you look on Google Plus, there's a community for public health data science, and it has over 1,000 members, for example. So I think the time is right. I think the kind of data sciencey sort of things that we talk about in this, the timing is right for. I've seen for it being kind of thought of at least as component of a standard public health curriculum. I have seen at least one ad for a data scientist from this school where it actually said specifically data science. data scientists. I think we were thinking for Coursera just because you'd want to hit the biggest possible audience. So we picked something A that we were interested in, and B felt like we were capable of teaching, and then C that we felt like would have the largest audience reach. For these things, you want to do things that hit as many people as possible because it all runs on scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pierre?
Very nice. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
Do you get solicitations from other biostatisticians, experts that would be affiliated with other universities who would like to join in the team and contribute to the content?
We've never gotten that. Never gotten that. The far and away, because I've been kind of doing a world tour for this stuff, far and away the more frequent comment is, why are you doing this? And very rarely is the comment, we would like to do it too. So we have had a couple of people, I should take that back, the handful of people who have contacted us have been our former students. So I don't know how fair that is. What we have seen, and Roger's class is far and away the most successful for this, is other departments replacing their in-person class with his course, a course that they didn't want to teach. So our program is one of those things where, like, it turns out that having Roger around is pretty unique, right? Most departments don't have someone who's highly invested in knowing R at the level that Roger knows R. And so for most people, R is just whatever programming language they happen to be using to do their work. But he's a true enthusiast to it. So for a lot of places, they don't have someone to teach that class, or they find it kind of annoying to teach, or whoever's teaching it doesn't really want to do it, and so they'll actually happily replace it with Roger's class, and that one's been pretty successful. And then boot camp has actually been listed as started to list. A former student at Brown is going to talk about using it as a prereq for some of their incoming master's students and doctoral students to say, look, we need you to know this, so take it in the summer before you show up. So we've gotten that, but we've never gotten people. We've seen people from around the university. That's one thing that's definitely true, is people from around the university want access to the online education setup that we have here. They want access to CTL and multimedia and places like that. So we get that a lot. I get a lot of other faculty from around the university saying, how do I get access to IRA and SUCON and that sort of thing?
What kind of college degree do you think your daughters are going to get?
What kind of
college? Traditional sense that we're still living these days. Right?
Well, what would I hope? I would hope that it would be. I hope you get a degree from Swirl University that that they attend while we while we sit at the top of Swirl corporate headquarters. But I also think that probably these ultra high quality, places like Hopkins that deliver ultra high quality in-person teaching, that still is the gold standard.
So Sarah?
What's the hashtag for this talk?
I don't. I don't know. We could just do Dean. How about JHU Dean's lecture?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
probably. So we could use that
people
for.
have been tweeting JHU Biostats.
Oh, okay.
I've been doing it.
Oh yeah, if you want to follow us at JHU Biostat, at Hopkins Smart is the working group's Twitter feed, and that's it. Don't.
Yeah, that's good. So
Oh, and Mike has a Twitter feed.
I do, as I'm tweeting right now.
What's your Twitter handle?
At MClagg.
At
Or
MClagg.
At Mike Clegg. At
And-
Mike Clegg. Yeah.
And the School of Public Health has one. And
Yeah, so that's Johns Hopkins SPH. Okay, so it was great, and I don't know what it is about MOOCs, but from the beginning, the idea is so attractive to those of us in public health that you can impact large numbers of people, and I think we implicitly, people in public health believe that if the more people who know about public health and understand populations and prevention, the better the world would be. I think that's what's driving it. But I'm really proud of the work that you and everybody who's been involved with this, from the senator to the department, and the whole school is proud. So thanks.
thanks.